All right, so our special speaker. So our special speaker comes to us from Inland Seas Education Association, also known as ISEA. That's in Suttons Bay. And so Jillian Votava, she is their STEM coordinator and schoolship educator. And she's joining us to share with us how we can use story maps to our advantage, and as a fellow watershed organization, and how they use story maps. So she manages various projects and outreach efforts. And then the Inland Seas, if you guys have not been on their schoolship, they were established in 1989, and they provide learners of all ages with hands-on experiences in local rivers and streams and wetlands and all of those kinds of things along the Great Lakes. And so the great thing about story maps is they can be accessed by anyone, anywhere with a link that can take them directly to your story that you create. And so she's going to talk a little bit about that. And she's also going to let you know the few different ways that you can use a story map and how you can display your information. And so with that, we'll hand it over to our speaker, Jillian.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name's Jillian. You may call me Jillian. Just a quick, while everyone's still on video, show of hands, how many of you are, I'm going to use the word familiar with using GIS systems? Just a show of hands, familiar. Okay. And how many of you are familiar, outside of Chelsea talking about story maps, familiar with story maps? Show of hands. Okay, so a few of you. So we're right in the middle. Just a quick background on myself. I've been involved in using GIS for over 10 years, ever since undergrad. I went to Michigan Tech and I did a geology degree there, and we were required to learn all sorts of GIS plus other remote sensing type software. So yeah, I've been using Esri products for quite a while. I'm gonna share with you first a story map that was created when I had an intern about 3 seasons ago, a local high school student, and she was with me for the summer. So I'm presenting her presentation, but I want you to know that Lauren Breederland is the one who put this presentation together, and I am presenting her presentation. I was the supervisor for it. I oversaw this project, but I'm presenting her her story map. And then after that, I want to answer any questions or kind of go into a little bit about using the software that we were using here. And then I'm going to show you examples from other water-based organizations, and you'll notice that the style looks a bit newer. They did some updates a few years ago. So Lauren's story map is before that update, but it still is showing you all the basic fundamentals of what a story map can do. Then I will show you newer versions with other water-based organizations. And then I really just want to be a resource to you to answer any of those questions about how we can use it, because there are some technical limitations that I want to make sure everyone understands, and we can get into that more. But I'm going to start first with our story here. So this is a story about the participants who come out on our schoolship program here in Suttons Bay, which will make sense in just a moment. Let me share my screen. Thumbs up. Can you see my screen? Head nod, thumbs up. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. So this is a web-based interface, and you just type in this URL, or I could share it with you right now, and this would open up in your web browser. This is our schoolship participants, 1989 to about 2014. Let me get that out of the way here. 2004, excuse me. So Tom Kelly is the founder of Inland Seas Education Association, and his goal was to combine his love of sailing and the education of students with the wonders of the Great Lakes. He achieved this by starting a nonprofit, that's ISEA, where I work today. And after 29 years, because it's a few years old now. ISEA has grown more than Tom could have ever imagined, and it has reached over, at the time, 118,000 participants aboard the Schoolship. These students have traveled from schools all over Michigan and beyond, and the Schoolship program, which runs in the spring and fall, takes students on a 3.5-hour sail to teach them about Great Lakes. And we are teaching Great Lakes ecology. This is something we're still doing. COVID was a weird year for all of us, and I'm happy to report that in 2 weeks we have our spring Schoolship starting up again. So we're still going at it, and we've got school field trips coming. The following maps are going to show the spread of influence of inland seas in the first 15 years of operation. And again, this story map was created by Lauren Breederland, who was a high school intern of mine in the summer of 2018. So we're focusing in on who has come all the way to visit us on a field trip. And the reason we took this approach as opposed to should we map some of the data that we collect while we're on board is because the data we collect on board is from one location. It's not spatially interesting in a GIS. However, I could tell you anecdotally we have schools from all over Michigan. And what would be better is if I had a map to show you where those classrooms are coming from. And so in order to do this, Lauren had to digitize the addresses of all those schools that were coming. We had records of all the school names. We even had all the old manifests, all the participants who had come out with us, but we didn't have it in a digital form. So Lauren went through and digitized the addresses, the names and addresses of each school, the date that they came out on a field trip, which in some instances was multiple times with us. She had to go year by year. So she started at 1989, worked through our records and got to 2004. And that was a good point for us to stop. So she digitized that into a spreadsheet. From there, we could ask the software to place a point based on the addresses of each of those schools. In addition to the address for each event, so when they came up for a field trip, we also included the number of students and the number of adult chaperones, which would give us a total number of participants who came from each of these schools. So right now we're looking at a map that shows where we've had schools come from. Each point represents the address of a school for these first 15 years. And this equated to 317 individual schools or school addresses on 1,495 different school field trips. So again, a lot of those schools are coming multiple times. With a GIS, the benefits, it's not just a map with points and lines and polygons on it. You can start to ask it various questions, spatial statistics, spatial analysis questions, and many of these tools are built in. So in this case, Lauren created a heat map, and heat maps are based on point data, which was the first one I showed you. And it's basically saying, I only see one point here, but in some cases, this point might have happened 10 times, right? A school came out with us 10 different times. And so when you run a heat map, it's looking at frequency. And as we zoom in, if we zoomed in on this map, it would sort of adjust and reanalyze. So this is called on-the-fly analysis. But this is what's called a heat map, and it's talking about frequency of a point data. So as we zoom in, we can see that it changes. The warmer the color, the more frequent we're having a field trip, a class, a school come from that area. And as you zoom out, it readjusts. So when we look at the whole lower Michigan, I can tell you that our most frequent areas, we have schools coming from the Traverse City area, but also from the Detroit area as well. These are our most frequent participants. The other thing you can do with a GIS is if you have any kind of time data, so a timestamp, in this case, it would just be a date, the day, month, and year. But if you had it for actual time of day too, any kind of time data, you can ask the software to become time aware. And so I've just got it playing as an animation. This is cumulative as we add more years each year, where all these different schools are coming from. So again, more to do than just having points because there's real information behind each of these points. So participation over time. The next thing that we asked, and again, this is Lauren's project and I was the supervisor, but I had her learning about things called like buffers, and it was how many schools are within a 50-mile radius of our center. So the red dot in the middle here is where we're located in Suttons Bay. And I had her learn how to create a buffer, which then you could ask the software how many points or whatever are occurring within this 50-mile radius. And so she did that. And again, besides just the points, like I know how many schools are from within here, 50 miles, but we could actually ask it how many participants, because one of the columns in that spreadsheet we added was participants. And so she found that for all the data, 1989, 2004, 50-mile radius, it's 554 classes from 89 different schools. And that equaled 16,082 participants from within a 50-mile radius. I think one of the things we get asked about a lot here at Inland Seas is where do our school groups come from? And most people assume that they are coming from the nearby region, but actually this is less than a third of our schools coming from this 50-mile radius. And now I've put it in a map and I can show that to anyone. I can show it to our board, I can show it to volunteers, I can show it to people who ask, and that's exactly what we did here. Along a similar line of analysis, we picked a 100-mile radius, and now Lauren was asking how many schools come from more than 100 miles away. Same sort of thing, and she found that there were 708 classes that came from 187 different schools, or 20,996 participants. So this is these schools account for 59% of all schools that have participated in this time span. So again, you can ask these sort of spatial questions once you get it into a GIS. And sort of the final question that she's showing here on her story map from this project that she did, and this was totally Lauren, this was not me. She asked, well, if we could do a radius like that, can we also ask about drive time? And the answer is yes, because the software has advanced enough that you can ask questions about drive time on major highways and things like that. So Lauren told me she knows that if they have to travel greater than 3.5 hours for an extracurricular sporting event, they have to get a coach bus. And so she used that idea of like 3 hours driving. It was just curious to her. How many of these schools are driving more than 3 hours to get here? And so we did, it's a similar thing. We're asking it to clip and outside of that polygon, but we asked the software to create this shape, which was based on how far you'd be driving. So that's what she did here. And we found out that this accounts for about 39 or 40% of all the schools attending drive more than 3 hours to come to Suttons Bay to do a program with us. So that's where our story ends here. This is just to give you a flavor. She was working on a GIS related project, and using this story map was one of the best ways for us to be able to show the results of that project, as opposed to pulling someone in to the desktop version of it and pulling up all of these maps individually. So that's really what this is optimized to do, is to present on like GIS work that you are working on. You have a finalized map after you've asked it questions, and now I am presenting to you those final maps. When you share this URL out with people, they cannot edit your map. They can click on the points and things in here, but they can't edit the data in any way. So it's a really nice, safe presentation mode, view-only mode. So I'm going to pause there and stop sharing for the moment. And I just want to see if there are any questions about Inland Seas' specific story map before I move on to my next part of this. Pausing for any questions. You can type them in the chat also, or unmute yourself. Okay, great. Seeing none, I am going to move on to show you guys a series of newer story maps, and it's a range of ways that you can use ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS story maps in general. The presentation you just saw that I just shared with you is the older legacy version of ArcGIS story maps, and it was a form of story map that is one of their most basic, which is that you have tabs across the top. I could click on those tabs in any order I wanted to, and each tab represented just like one sort of multimedia experience. There are many other types of story maps, so we're going to walk through those now, including things that are called story maps that are actually just multimedia narrative that is more like a journal. You scroll down through it, and so you have to read it in order. And the one I'm going to share with you next, you will notice, does not even have any maps in it. So you don't actually even need to have a map in it. It can just be used as a presentation, a web-based presentation platform. And it is, it does really well with multimedia. So static pictures as well as embedding video, as long as that video is already hosted, say on YouTube or Vimeo or something like that. So here's a story map. Notice there's no logo except the Esri ArcGIS story map logo at the top. This is called Invest in Rivers. This is what I would call a campaign. So this is something they can share out with people, this particular organization that is trying to fundraise and campaign for cleaning up their river. You'll notice there's a lot of text. I'm not going to read it all to you. I want us to just look at it visually. There's picture, there's text, there's hyperlinks. There's links to their reports. And the way that these work is, again, you'd probably have this hosted somewhere else, like this PDF is hosted on your website, and you just put the link in right here. And this becomes a really easy, shareable, it's just a URL you send people right here. Lots of room to fit in graphics that are already pre-made. And again, you could have video, and I think they have one towards the end, who's involved, things like that. Yeah, they've embedded a video down here. You can just watch it right here. If I press play, this will start playing, or I could go out to YouTube and watch it there. So really easy. The thing that I would want to point out right here is that notice this is really the place where you would put your final product. So finalized graphics, finalized video. You're not creating graphics or creating video once you're putting together your story map. Great. The next one that I want to show you does have a lot of maps in it. If someone could give me a thumbs up or just unmute and say yes, do you see, does it say coastal flooding on your screen, or does it still say invest in rivers?
We see coastal flooding.
Awesome, thank you so much. Sometimes it doesn't move to the next tab and I'm sharing a different tab. Thank you very much. Okay, so coastal flooding. And one thing I want to point out that we're looking at here is that we do see a logo now at the top left. We've got NOAA's logo plus their title. In the previous one I showed, it just had the ArcGIS, the Esri logo for that. That to me is a clear indication that this is a higher level paid subscription. This was created with a paid subscription because Once you get into those tiers of paid subscription with Esri products, you can have your own logo included. And we'll get to that after I'm done presenting this. But just so you can see what a story map can do. This is going to be about coastal flooding, and this was a presentation put together by NOAA and Old Dominion University. I get to a series of tabs. I could click on these and move to that section, or I can just continue to scroll right from the top in the order that they want me to follow the story in, okay? So they want me to follow the story in this way. They've got graphs, graphics, they've got pictures, they've got text, and then they get to these really sort of fancy integrated multimedia, which is that I'm still scrolling downwards, but now I'm stuck on this 3-screen sort of interface. They're showing me, this island. They've got a picture from the island, and they've got some text that as I scroll down, it's the text that's scrolling through. As I move to the next point, which is point number 2 in their sort of tour that they want to take me on, again, I'm just scrolling down on my trackpad here, and it has moved me to the next thing they want to show me. So they have picked out an order for this coastal flooding story that they want to share. And I continue to scroll down and read it in the order that they have presented it. I can click on these tabs at the top and just jump to the next section. I do want to show you what are the data telling us, because I want you to see that they have included some really incredible and immersive maps in this particular story map. And because it's NOAA and some of the larger agencies, they have these very cool maps that they can share out, and graphics. This map right here, I do want to show you, is really cool. Again, this would be something you would create before you get to the story map. You're playing around in ArcGIS Online, or you might even have the ArcGIS desktop version. You'd be creating these things in the background, and once you get to this final place with your map, then you come to your story map. You're creating a story and a presentation, and you would insert this. This is called a swipe style of map, and it's comparing 2 things. And here it's kind of showing you, this is just the aerial view of this area, and as I swipe this over, it's putting in a layer, which is to show me where these sort of most likely areas of flooding due to sea level rise. So you can it's an easy to compare 2 different things. Again, those are maps that you would have to create before you get to the presentation point. So yeah, I just wanted to show you these things. There's lots of ways to do it, lots of ways to make it immersive. And again, it is optimized as a presentation tool. And depending on your organization or your level of working with maps in the background, you might have maps to share. You might not have any maps at all beyond just placing a point somewhere on a publicly available base map. Think of just like a road map. And I just want to show you where it is in relation to some other cities. And then I'm mostly going to send you pictures and text and talk about it. Great. So the last example that I want to share with you is actually something that's called a dashboard. And if any of your organizations already have ArcGIS Online, which we'll talk about as a separate topic as soon as I'm done, I just wanted to show you one other thing. It's not a story map, it's called a dashboard. But for some organizations, this might be more helpful than a story map, where a story map really is trying with text and narration and multimedia to tell a story. A dashboard is exactly what it sounds like. It's a data dashboard that you could embed on your website, and people can come to get information quickly. So I'm just going to show you an example of that really quick. And this is actually from our neck of the woods. This is the Elk River Chain of Lakes Watershed. This is their website. So you go to their website and you scroll down and you get to this section here. It's embedded on their website, but this is an Esri product. So if you have ArcGIS Online, you'd be able to create one of these, and it's called a dashboard, embedded on their website. And this is, they wanted people to be able to come here and see this shoreline survey that they've done across these lakes. So they've embedded this on their website. I, as the user that I have no editing access at all, I can zoom in and out in this map in the middle. If I had an ID number for my parcel, let's say, I could type that in here and get the Greenbelt score. I can sort of browse these graphs that they have put up. I can't change any of it because I'm not an editor. This is just what it looks like from the user end. So this is a dashboard. If you had some very interesting spatial data or spatial points that you wanted to share with people, I would suggest using a dashboard instead of a story map. But let's talk about some of those technical items that you need to know about before you can even start creating a story map. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're all going to come back together. So the biggest thing that I want to point out, there's a few big things that I want to point out, but the first thing is that it is story maps, so storymaps.arcgis.com, all optimized to be a presentation tool of multimedia and spatial things. So whether or not you have any maps like we saw in the first one, it was all just graphics and text and video. You can just put one together that way. This is an Esri product. That is the parent company of anything that is ArcGIS. And just like most of the major companies around here, there's not much you can do for free. There's a small bit of things you can do for free. If you were going to put together a map or a story map, say like a tour through your watershed, you could do that as you, a individual citizen. Me, Jillian Votava, can create a walking tour for someone to just say, I think this is really cool. Me, Jillian Votava, as an inland seas representative, putting together something and saying my organization XYZ wants to show you this, that's actually a no-no, according to Esri. It's only for personal use that you can have a free account. So I know that Chelsea had mentioned that this is a free resource, but actually there is cost associated with almost everything, and there are a few ways to get around that or in a different category. But I want you to know that if you went to esri.com or arcgis.com right now and signed up for a free account, you could only do it as a personal thing, and you could only create things as an individual citizen. You would not be able to represent an organization. So I hope we're clear on that point. They do have various pricing structures. And one thing I will say is the reason that Inland Seas has an ArcGIS Online organizational account is because we do education and outreach. So we fall under the classification of the education avenue of getting ArcGIS products out. So there's a whole initiative to get ArcGIS into the school system. And because we work with so many schools and teachers, we were able to fall under that category. I'm not sure how much each of you will be able to fall under that category. However, I do think there are some nonprofit pricings available, and of course there are governmental pricings available, which are different from I'm a for-profit business XYZ. But unfortunately with Esri, just like with everything else, you do need to create an account before you can do anything with these tools or products. So I'm going to stop there for a moment just to see if there are any questions in that regard.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. And I'll have to go on there and see if I can figure out the different pricing for nonprofits versus government versus all of that. And I can get that out to you guys when I send the minutes. And then I actually had a question about the first map that we looked at. So
Yes.
those data points, are you able to put
The inland
Yeah.
seas ones.
Yes, on the Michigan base map.
Mhm.
Are you able to put multiple data points, like such as different dates and different results for different tests on each data point, or do they all need to be like their separate data points?
Yeah, great question. You should think of every, when you add a data point, you should think of it as an event.
Hmm.
So if you have the same location, say you've got some established sampling locations, but you're taking tests, once a month or every other week, each of those is a separate event, right? And
Hmm.
there's two ways to go about it. Like you would physically place another point on it because it's a different event for a different testing event, or you have this established location in space, this point, and then within that, the way you've set up your fields, it reads just like a table. The way you've set up your fields is that you're going to have multiple events or things that have happened at that location. There's kind of two ways to think about it, and it has to do with you would choose which way to go based on what you're going to do with that information. So it depends how you want to present it. I took the choice of every single event, even if that school came before, we put another point on. So if TC Central has come every single season for 15 seasons, that means there were 15 unique events. We did actually, the way that it added into the database was that there's 15 points sitting on top of each other at that address location. Um, I decided to do it that way because then I knew for a fact every single event or field trip was its own unique event. It had its own unique point. It meant I could do that heat map, and it's looking at the frequency of those points occurring. But other people might not want to do an analysis like that. It might not make sense for you to make a heat map if you have
Hmm.
3 sampling locations and all the heat map would show you is your 3 sampling locations. Like that's not the data. That wouldn't matter to you, right?
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of thinking about what do you want to be able to visualize? What do you want that to look like at the end? That'll help you make decisions on the front end about how you might input that data. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. So I was thinking about it in regards to, so we have 9 stream sites that we sample twice a year. And so I was just thinking about if we had those 9 established sites and then you go and click or you hover over that data point, it could just display the past years of data and those results from that point.
Yes. Yes, it can do that. And the fun thing about it is that it will even I did some of this with our collection data, so not the schools, but what we actually sample. And
Mhm.
again, just like you, we have like 2 locations we go to in Suttons Bay all the time. So it's not spatially interesting, but the way you put it in the background is that then when someone clicks on that point, uh, I could have a pie chart display, I could have a little graph display, because that is how the data has been entered, which is really cool. Or it could just be a table and it's just simple 2 or 3 columns and someone scrolls down to read and it's the date and the parameter value, right? And you could just read once you
Yeah,
click on that point. So
I thought it would be a funner way to display that information to the community as opposed to just a table with numbers. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And just how you saw that dashboard that the chain of lakes uses, they kind of knew what the common things people wanted to look up. And so they made a little dashboard for that. The one thing I'll say about they made it like the dashboard, I'm not associated with Chain of Lakes at all, right? And I just
Mhm.
went to their website and then I could browse on the information they have displayed there. So a dashboard's really good for that. Story map also really good for that. If it's something you want to use internally, and I'm calling this internally, even though you're all from different organizations, there
Mhm.
could be another way to do it. But the general public coming to your web page or just following a URL link, right? You have to think about that's a different way that you just want someone to view but not be able to edit or contribute, right?
Yes.
So just a good thing to keep in mind. And the story maps are really good for that sort of end user. Like, I just want them to see it, but they're not going to be able to edit or contribute or do anything like that.
Okay, great.
Other questions? I'm happy to show a few of the different types of story maps. Like, I can open up what that looks like when you create your first one. But it kind of depends on how many of you, like if your organizations already have access to ArcGIS Online, or if they don't, because it'll look different. And if you watch my screen, you're going to see me going through, I have a sign on and an account with Inland Seas. So it's not necessarily helpful if none of you have an ArcGIS Online organizational account. It would look different for you. So I kind of want to pause there and just find out how many of you are at organizations that have used ArcGIS at all, or is nobody using it right now?
I would assume Alexis and Zach probably do quite a bit.
Yeah, we have a we're tied into the federal geo platform here, so we have the full Esri suite, luckily. So
Oh, great.
yeah, thanks for sharing this. I was interested especially in the dashboards because I feel like there's like 20 different apps on the Esri site that I've been poking around but haven't really jumped into dashboards yet. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
I had a quick question about that. If you mentioned it could be embedded site, can it also just be as a standalone site as a link the same
As
way?
far as I know, yes. Any of the apps, right, as we call them apps, sounds like you're familiar with browsing them. A story map is an app, is an application. Dashboard is an app. As far as I know, once you've saved it as such to publish, right, you have to tell it the level of privacy or non-privacy that it's at. It's called publishing it. And then I think it's just from that URL, and you could share that with other people, and they click on the URL and it just opens them to a little dashboard. They're a viewer, not a contributor, but as far as I know, that's how it works. But if you haven't published it to be available to everyone, or what's called public, no one would be able to access it without signing in and being a part of your organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That makes sense a lot. I'm definitely gonna have to poke around that. Because I had started some story maps, but I found that it wasn't, I wanted to have more spatial, and the map aspect was almost too small for me. So yeah,
Okay.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Any other questions? I'm glad to hear that some of the organizations have access to that. And of course, there's tons of like free resources and training tutorials on Esri. They're pretty good about that sort of a thing. Lots of training and resources to follow. It's a lot if you haven't had like a thorough introduction to the background of it. That has been my experience explaining like the whole of what Esri does, and there's this whole like background setting up databases that it's helpful to know a little bit about before you start jumping into stuff. But thankfully I had at least 2 college level classes, full semesters, that were just learning that. But sometimes that's, kind of too much information for most people. Any other questions? I'm happy to show you what it looks like to get started if you're at all curious.
Great.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen again. And this time we're going to start from the beginning. Okay, so we're at just like a home page. We're going to go to storymaps.arcgis.com. I am already signed in. So if you look at the top right corner, I've got my picture. That means I'm signed in. If it wasn't signed in, it would just be prompting you to sign in or to sign up for an account. And again, as I mentioned, you can sign up for a free account. It would be considered a personal account so that you can play with all of these apps and things. And it is really good for learning. So if you're just like, I don't even know, I just want to try it, I don't think my organization has this, you can always create a free personal account and then start poking around. Here, if you just went to arcgis.com, it'd be the same thing. Your login credentials are going to be used on any of these apps that you might sign into. And here under quick links, lots of tutorials and lots of helpful things. Because we're in StoryMaps, this is all going to be about making good stories. But their tutorials are really helpful. It's lots of videos. Esri has put in a lot of time in their tutorial and training. You'll see that I only have one, and it's not the story I shared with you because in 2019, they upgraded and updated their software. So the map I showed you at the start of our presentation is what's called a legacy story map. It was built before this new upgrade. And since then, there's only been one thing that we created, which was really just a travel log that I'm not going to share with you right now. But really easy, once you start here, it's just start a new story. And they've got 3 sort of quick start ready-made ones. The sidecar, which is just, you've got lots of pictures or graphics or even maps on the right or the left, and then you've got all sorts of text and more multimedia that will be scrolling on the left or right side. The guided map tour, especially for like an outreach thing, I think this one's really good because it walks your audience through locations sequentially. So you decide the order, just like a guided walking tour would be. Like, we're going to start here, so it's labeled 1, and they can't jump around the map. They have to scroll through 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So you could take someone on a walking tour of your project or your watershed. The Explorer tour, again, has all those points on the map, but the viewer can jump to them in any order that they want to. And it's kind of got them as thumbnails on the side, but when you click on those points, all the text or multimedia or information you have put about that point will open up and expand just to that. So really super easy. For example, let's do map tour. They've made these really easy to get started with, especially if you're okay with all the defaults. You'd give it a title and a subtitle and you put your name, and then you get this base map and you'd start adding your points and you'd start being able to add your images, video, description, all of those things. They make it very easy as clicking your point and typing in your things here. Then you can add your next point, right? And we're moving around. There are some really nice base map options. We could do political boundaries, we could do aerial satellite imagery. Maybe you want it to look old-timey, or you want it to be sort of dark because you're going to have all these like bright graphics and pictures popping out. And these are all just sort of the standard things that you could pick in the background. And there's always the option to browse more. So that's pretty cool. So it's not like you need to have all of those things to get started. All I need is information and text in this case to get started. Up at the top left, it says draft, but saved. So it's auto saving as I go, but it's only a draft, and it'll be called draft until I go over here and I hit this button that says publish. So Alexis, that's kind of the part, I think all the apps would have this, it'd be this publish. Right now it's private, so I'm the only one that can see it. I could share it to my organization. Anyone who is in the Inland Seas ArcGIS Online org would be able to see this story, or I can publish to everyone in public which means that once I publish it here, I can share it as a URL out to my friends or, people who aren't within this organization. So you have to set your publish level to be able to do that. And yay, now it's published. My very, very quick story that is nothing. Great. This is how I would share, and I could just copy this URL. I could give this to you in the chat and you should be able to open it, and it would just be this very ugly test story map. And they've made it really simple, which is great, because when I started using ArcGIS stuff, like maybe some of you have this experience too, it was not that easy and it was very clunky. Okay, let's go back. Now it tells me that it's published. I'm like in the story, it tells me that it's published as opposed to draft. Anytime you're working on one of these apps, you should look up in that left corner and find out if yours is a draft or if it's published. It's published with a little world symbol. So I know that that means that's the symbol that they use for when it's public. If it had a little brick building, that would mean it's published only to my organization. Clear as mud, right? So yeah, that's how to get started in ArcGIS StoryMaps. If I were to go, I could show you how to get to dashboard. I'm not sure if anyone but Alexis is interested in that, but it'd be sort of the same thing. I would go to arcgis.com, and then from there it would have my collection of things, including maps and layers and spreadsheets that I've added, that I'm working on various different things. But it would have this option to create a new app. Story maps are one type of app, but a dashboard would be another type of app. And just off the top of my head, other types of apps that are available are things like the ArcGIS, the Survey 123, which I think has changed names, but that's a location-based survey, which I just had some students do one for me a few days ago. And they picked a location of where they were born, and then I was asking them questions about the quality of the water in their watershed where they were born. And then once all the responses are collected, you can see the responses. So like yes, no, maybe, it was color coded based on the locations on the map. So then the points on the map were color coded based on how people responded to those survey questions. So that's another type of spatially oriented app that can be used. I'm going to pause there because I can talk forever. And just see if anyone has any other questions about that, about getting started. I'm pretty sure base level licensing, if you're not already in it, is probably on the order of $500 a year. But I didn't look further into that. It might be less for nonprofit when you fall into a nonprofit category. The cheapest things I've ever seen Esri sell are at like $100 a year, and they are subscription based since like the last, I don't know, 8 years or something. That is just the way that they're doing things now. Which it's good. It has its benefits. As you saw how easy it was to just click on those buttons and start creating, that was not always the case with ArcGIS products. It was like, we're all working on our desktop, and then I've got to save all these files, and there's like 12 files associated with one map. I got to put it in a package and give it to my friend. Then they got to open it and do the thing. Like, it was not easy. And now that it has this web-based component, it does make it a lot easier to share. So I will say there is benefit that you get what you pay for, and their tutorials are just really amazing and can be really helpful in your personal learning and growth.
Yeah, and like I said, I will get a breakdown of the pricing, comparing it to all the different types of organizations that we have represented in our group. And so we can kind of pick through that. And then there's just like an endless stream of ideas, just listening to what these tools can do and how useful they can be. So, and I know everybody in this group will have some, way that they could use it. So LMWCC, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking like you guys, you have some septic work coming up or septic locations and E. coli data that you want to present, and that would be great for that. We also have, invasive species locations on the river that maybe we'd want to pinpoint for people to know exactly where those are and what's being done at those locations. And then, we usually have a representative from Spirit of the Woods here, and they've been dealing with box turtles and box turtle habitat destruction and things like that. And so maybe they could map out where exactly they have their turtle boxes that are protecting their habitats along the river, and have, pictures that show up with those data points so people can look and see the state of the nest or what that area looks like on the river and things like that. So just a million ideas.
Yes, absolutely. There are free and alternative options out there. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't point them out to you. But there's not going to be the support, the training support, or the tutorials. It's just not the same. So fully capable GIS analysis software is something called QGIS, and it has a few other names. It's a freeware, but it's going to be all scripting. And you have to be the right personality to want to do like scripting where I tell the computer in query language how to analyze the data, right? I know students who have used that because they didn't want to go in, use the Esri stuff. And anyways, they were into that sort of thing and they could do it, and it does work. I've seen the final products of those, but you have to be really into that sort of thing to want to use it. And then of course there's always just using Google Earth or Google Maps if all that you want to show is just to be able to like show somebody, here are my locations, and then very minimal information underneath those points. Google Maps still lets you have like your own projects, or even better, using Google Earth, you can save little projects and you could have tours and you can just share that with other people. But that's really more just going to be in the sense of like points with some very minimal text like information.
Yeah, they wouldn't allow
of
the
it.
media component, I wouldn't think.
I can't remember, it's been so long since I've used Google Earth, and I know there's a Google Earth engine part of it too. You'd have to check. I mean, because nowadays being able to like insert a smaller size like thumbnail picture, lots of things let you do that nowadays. So you'd have to check on that. But you wouldn't be able to do spatial analysis questions. So any of the things that I showed you in the Inland Seas version, like we made buffers and we said, how many things are happening within 50-mile radius, or how many things are happening outside of a 50-mile radius. You're not going to be able to do that on Google Maps, or as far as I know with Google Earth. I think you can do some basic measurements in Google Earth, linear, right, and draw a polygon and get areas, but it's limited. It's more limited because it's free. So anyways, back to that whole point, like, yes, it's in a subscription-based thing now, but you do get what you pay for. Any other thoughts or questions that I can help with right now? I'm always excited to talk about maps.
I would just say that I first learned about story maps. I mean, it had to have been like 6 or 8 years ago. And I'm surprised that I mean, they're so cool. I'm surprised I haven't seen them used more. So I know in Eagle, we're starting to use them more, but I can't believe it's taken so long. But I just,
Yeah.
they're so easy. I hope we start seeing them more because they're so user friendly on both,
Yeah,
both ends.
I would say they got easier in the last like 3 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
Before the upgrade to the 2019, they were easy to build if you were already comfortable in the ArcGIS Online environment, because you had to know about, this is a web hosted layer and this is a web mapping application and this is you just get your file name and they've all got different extensions and you had to know what you were like adding into it. So it has gotten way easier. So I mean, I imagine it'll just be upwards from there, but it did feel like when they first started, the end product still looked cool, but you needed somebody on that team who was like, oh yeah, I know what these file extensions mean. I'll get the right there. So it's only gotten better. And yeah, I bet we'll see more people utilizing these things.
And I would share that I've seen it in our permitting work. I've seen some permittees using it for reporting. They will use Survey 123, and it's not the story maps, but it's the ArcGIS. It's just another thing. But they'll send crews out in the field to do assessments, maybe for like monitoring of like fish habitat structures, for example, like Trout Unlimited is doing this, and so that's really cool too. To link some of your like field like things you have on your phone in like the Survey 123 app that you have on your phone. And then for me, when I'm reading their report, I just like click on, like a dot on the map and can see the data that they collected at that site. So for anybody that's useful for on this call, that's been really pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the main use of that Survey 123, which might be called ArcGIS Collector now. I think that's the main way that software has been used and refined, is exactly what you just mentioned. You've got field crews and field inspectors. They're either using their cell phone because they've downloaded an app that is just very easy drop down, click check boxes. They don't have to type things in, or they have a tablet in the field. And then all that data is just being, to a centralized web-based location, and someone in the office is organizing and coordinating that. And that it's been really refined for that specific use.
All right, anybody got any other questions? No? All right. Well, I think that we'll probably come up with some with it after this presentation. I know that I will. And if you guys think of anything after the presentation ends and you want to get in touch with Jillian, I have her contact information. She is obviously a great resource and knows a lot about all the different aspects and tools that are available. And I would really encourage you to go on there and start playing around with the free version. I've done that, and it's very educational and helps you just kind of learn like what's available and what you can start doing. And then, like I said, I will get that pricing list out to everybody and make sure that we all get that and can plan for the future what we want to do with this tool. So all right, Jillian, thank you so much. That presentation was great. And we will be in touch. I'll go ahead and stop this recording.